hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lue Reviews. I'm your host, Luis Jimenez. Welcome to your home and destination for critical thinking in the realm of the unexplained. Please, before we get started, hit that like, subscribe, and share button. It goes a very long way to making sure that we continue to grow. And if you really like us, hell, hit that bell. That way you're notified every time we go live here on YouTube, which is Mondays and Fridays from 3 to 5. We normally do our Twitter Spaces on Wednesdays. This upcoming week, we're going to be doing it on Thursday with Matthew Riot, who's going to be bringing a book for us to go over. So that'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, I didn't get to do one this week because this week has been insanely busy with meetings for me. So I haven't been attending or listening or doing many spaces this week at all. But I have listened to one this morning. We're going to talk about it a little bit later in the show. But mainly, we're going to be talking about Lue Elizondo. And is he a target? He made some pretty big claims this last week in a statement using his two favorite conduits, Matt Ford and Ross Coulthart. And there's also a few other things that we're going to get into as well. So let's get into it. Thank you guys so much for being here. Jay Perez, Gracie DeVars. Now I am here. Become Death. Simon Fly, Complizier. All of you guys, thank you so damn much for being here. Sparky Pilot, one of our mods. Thank you, Sparky Pilot, for being here. All right, you guys, let's get started with the show, shall we? Bring this down here a little bit. I'll bring my mic a little down too. There we go. Okay, so let's switch to our good old Lue Reviews bookmarks. The first thing, obviously, we're going to go over are these statements right here. And these were the three statements that were read out loud by Matt Ford of the Good Trouble Show, because he's the new mouthpiece for Lue Elizondo. So therefore, he's going to be getting all the excuses and all the things from Lue Elizondo now because he plays ball. He doesn't question anything that Lue says. So what did Lue say this last week? Now, since these remarks have come out, there have been some very, very, oopsies. No, I didn't want to do that. There have been some people reaching out to me. And, well, let's see here. Why is this? There we go. Yeah, it doesn't let me zoom in on this, unfortunately. All right, but I can read it. Okay, so this is from Lue Elizondo. Sorry if it's a little small for you guys out there, but this is posted on John Greenwald's Black Vault, or you could go to probably the Good Trouble Show probably has it. So Lue says, when people first inquired about my story, the Pentagon initially confirmed my role in ATIP and the focus of his efforts. Shortly after Secretary Mattis left the department, the Pentagon changed its tune by saying all of my emails had been deleted. The same emails that would substantiate not only my claims, but many of those who were part of the ATIP effort, including one of its sponsors, the late Senator Harry Reid. Later, when confronted with a FOIA request, the Pentagon denied again the existence of any email or correspondence between me and other seniors within the department who I was regularly engaged with until the day I left the Pentagon in 2017. Recently, one of my emails was leaked by an unknown person on Reddit. Interesting. This time, when the Pentagon was challenged with the existence of the email, in this case, one that described the authorized transfer of ATIP leadership responsibilities to another senior member of the department and endorsed by Secretary of Defense front office. They were forced to admit that this email existed and was not deleted as they previously claimed. Begrudgingly, when the Pentagon finally did release the email, proving my role and participation in ATIP, the Pentagon decided to retract the mention of ATIP, citing FOIA exemptions. By this logic, they would also have to redact the name AARO and any other office at the Pentagon. It should also be noted that the Pentagon's mouthpiece for this is, sorry guys, this is really small, so I'm having a hard time reading it. Mouthpiece for this is one individual within the Public Affairs Office who has been given sole authority to handle all FOIA requests involving UAPs, AARO, ATIP, and specifically me. All this information in the public sphere and can be easily verified thanks to the works of certain private citizens fighting for increased government transparency through the FOIA process. He can't say John Greenwald. Which is, come on, man. Like, simply put, you and Congress continue to be lied to by a few at the Pentagon who prefer to view you and the American people as sheeple. Sheeple. Oh, man. Make no mistake, the Pentagon Public Affairs Office has a long history of feeding misinformation to certain questionable journalists to mislead the American people or public, and that relationship is alive and well today, and in fact is now legal through a new and disturbing policy of perception management. This sounds like a political ad up until we get to this part. To add insult to injury, I was notified yesterday that there may be a personal threat against myself and several other whistleblowers formerly associated with the UAP effort for the United States government. As such, I would like to make this perfectly clear to the American people. I am not prone to accidents. I am not suicidal. I am not abusing drugs. I am not engaged in any illicit activities. If something happens to me or my family members in the future, you will know what happened. Explanation point. Lue Elizondo, former director, Pentagon Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. So this is the message that he gave to Matt Ford. And of course it was a big fucking hit. And I'm sure he didn't get anywhere near the amount of clicks and revenue that I get from doing this show. The let's question everything, especially when it comes out of the mouth of this guy show. So there's a few things here. First and foremost, nobody should be threatened. But the problem with this statement is, like, I'm not prone to accidents. You're missing your fingernails because you dropped an engine block on your hands and had to pull them out and your fingernails went with them. That's an accident. So if something like that happens to you, if somebody breathes on you, people are going to automatically now think that the government did it. There's no wiggle room for anything to happen to the guy with no fingernails because now he's told every single one of his followers that his life is in danger. Not only his life, but several other whistleblowers. I want to believe this. I do. The thing is, though, is behind the scenes, I'm hearing other things. And I can't say because I promised, but I'm hearing other things, and we'll just see if those other things come to fruition. But from my understanding, It's not going to be a great year for Lue Elizondo. A banger year like everybody was predicting. It's just not. So we'll see how it plays out. It's funny that he would say something like this when he himself has incited this kind of feeling in other people. Like when his band of misfit, sycophant, cult member followers came after me, my girlfriend, came after Paranormal Chris, came after Rather, came after Mike, came after Jane, came after the Toddy Waba girls, came after Keith Clore, came after Stephen Greenstreet, came after John Greenwald with death threats. A lot of them. Throwing around words like coward and backstabber and traitor. It's just like now we're supposed to turn around and feel sorry for you. I hope nothing happens. I hope nobody's actually threatening you. But if somebody is, go to your local authorities. Just like we've had to do. Or call somebody's mommy. This last statement, it's just so loaded. And it really kind of just offsets everything that came before it. But there are some things that are just not accurate. Through that same FOIA process, we found out that your communications with these high level government people, you quit the same day that they responded to you. That, okay, let's, I guess, take a look at this. Break it down for me so I understand kind of email. Yeah, no problem. And then quit. You know, you've got colleagues that don't show up to appointments and leave people hanging for a half hour. Then don't get back to them till end of day. You know, one of the most famous loudmouths out there was like, well, why do you believe Sean Kirkpatrick when he makes claims that people showed up to his house and he had to call the FBI on these people? I believe that because there are countless of other people that are not Sean Kirkpatrick, that don't sit on the NASA panel that study UAPs, that have experienced the exact same issue. And why does Sean Kirkpatrick, the guy with infinitely higher credentials, have to prove to you, or anybody for that matter, that, yeah, he's been threatened by a group of people that have tendencies to believe things like Pizzagate? That's not that far of a stretch. But when it's coming out of the mouth of the guy who claims there's back-engineered, reverse-engineered alien programs, that we've garnered technology from crashed alien objects, has hinted at things like cryptoterrestrials, and apparently he's going to have a tell-all book that he's stealing stories from his friends to actually finish the book with. And his friends are like, please stop doing that. Yeah, when he makes claims like this, forgive me if the eyes of my skull roll to the back of my head. It's not that I don't want to believe it or that I wish him harm, but I have a hard time believing this claim. Especially like all of your other claims, it comes with zero evidence of that, except for Marieke von Klompenstick saying, that definitely happened. Marieke von Rennenkampf. Marieke von Rennenkampf. The former Department of Defense guy. Let's see if I can find his. I know it's Mavren, but he probably blocked me. There he is. Oh, no, he didn't. All right. Let's see. What did he say about this garbage? Calls Mick West a fraud, even though he lost a debate to Mick West. God, this guy. Ah, man, he provides arguments just like Danny Miller. And I'll post this lately. I've been aware. Okay, yeah, here's what he says right here. Go ahead and bookmark it. Because I do not post this lightly. This is for Marieke von Rennenkampf, as also known as Marieke von Kloppenstick, a fake journalist for The Hill. Not a journalist at all. He's an opinion piece writer. That's by his own admission. He writes, I do not post this lightly. I have been made aware of specific, credible threats against Lue Elizondo. At this time, I am unaware of specific, credible threats against other confirmed or prospective UAP whistleblowers. So he's lying, and also I can't confirm the second part of what he's saying. Or, excuse me, he's telling the truth, and I can't confirm the second part of what he's saying. I do not post this lightly. Okay, who are these specific credible threats? Because if they're people within the State Department or the Department of Defense or the Aero Office or lawmakers, you should, well, first of all, shouldn't post it on Twitter. I would think that you would go to your local lawmaker and make the report against it. If it's people within the Department of Defense, you could go to the FBI. I mean, there's so many other ways that Lue Elizondo was very, like, he did not like the way Edward Snowden released that information because he said he didn't go through the proper channels. Well, there's a lot of proper channels before you hit the Matt Ford show that you could have gone through to tell the world that you were being threatened by somebody. I mean, even a statement from your attorney, I think, would have been better from your handle. But no, you want to give the scoop to the Matt Ford show. And that way Ross Coulthart and him could dunk this fake basketball that they're holding on a 6-foot rim. Thank you so much, Pat Calabria, for the $5 donation. Appreciate it. Yeah, man. It's just wild. Absolutely wild to me. Let's listen to a little bit of what...
You can take it to the bank.
Oh, you can take it to the bank. Whistleblowers are being... Okay, yeah. There's a few clips here, especially from Ross Coulthart being agitated. Let me see how
Lue says...
Okay, good. The audio's good on that. All right, so this is Ross Coulthart on News Nation. Let's listen to what he's got to say. Oh, by the way, fair use. Fair use. This is transformative work. We're educating the public on the videos we are sharing and critiquing. This is covered under fair use and allowable by law.
You can take it to the bank. If Lue says he's being threatened, he bloody well is.
Why can we take that to the bank? Why? What other claims has he made that have been bulletproof, taking to the bank kind of statements?
And I know others who are being. And this is serious. This is a very grave situation.
Oh, this is a News Nation. This is the Kid Trouble Show. Oh, what's the difference, really?
Because we're talking at a time when there's been a complete abrogation of responsibility by the mass media. They've allowed themselves to be sheepled, to be led by the nose.
Sheeple. That's the new credible and urgent. That's the new ontological shock. The new phrase is sheeple. So we get it once from Elizondo, and now here we got Coulthard doubling down on it, baby. They are literally doing this like they release statements for the national press to pick up and then talk about on the nightly news. All right, keyword sheeple. Make sure you throw that into whenever you're talking about this, because we don't want people to think they're sheeple. They're playing to a base here, and it's clear what base they are playing to. Sheeple. Oh, what a bunch of dicks.
Knows, to be completely and utterly convinced that this is all a BS story. And I don't know how to say it more strongly. This is real. This is an authentic national scandal happening right under our noses.
That nobody's talking about except for Ross Coulthard on some asshole's YouTube channel. That's how important it is. That's how everybody's missing it, except for these two dickheads.
Where people inside the Defense Department, not everybody, but people at a very high level in the Defense Department are coordinating a deception operation on the American public. And it's not just in the Defense Department.
Look how angry Matt Ford is. I can't fucking believe it. This is America, god damn it. Sheeple. I know that's a Republican speaking term, but god damn, I'm mad. I'm pretty much Republican, except for the gay rights thing and the trans stuff and all the other Republican conservative talking points that I can't stand. But god damn it, I'm not going to be a sheeple.
Department. It's across the CIA OGA office. It's through DIA. There's been a decision made that the knowledge that has been gained from NHI tech is so important that this is a national security secret that must be kept from the Congress. They can't be trusted. They're just temporary employees. We know better. That's
Nope, sure
really the
can't be,
attitude.
Ross.
This is what we're talking about here. And I find it, frankly, frightening. Your country's at a crossroads right now.
Listen to this shit. Your country's at a crossroads right now. Is it? Is it, Ross? If the crossroads are alien tech is not being released, that's the crossroads. Not the civil unrest on the border of Palestine and Israel. That's not a crossroad. Chinese drones infiltrating our airspace. That's not a crossroad. It's the reverse engineered legacy UFO programs that don't exist, and he knows where they're at, and the people who run them. But he's the only guy in the world who's actually getting it. Or can read between the lines. And Matt Ford here, yeah, I'm angry.
It's really interesting. I speak with great respect and love for a country whose constitution I've studied in law school, and admired. There's not much point, though, in having a constitution unless you honor it.
Oh,
and one of the things in that constitution,
yes, that's right, Ross.
And insubordination in military law is perhaps the gravest offence of all. And here it is, black and white, the evidence.
So once again, Ross Coulthard doubles down on insubordination. When you look up the penalties for insubordination in the military, the penalty for that is sometimes death. And since it's coming from the guy who's already called for military people and veterans to be stoned, then dragged behind Humvees for all to see, here comes some more language to incite people to get fucking stupid. But he loves this country. Loves it so much. And Matt Ford over here, yeah, incite the fuck out of him, Ross. Kooky guys, man.
We're talking to people from the National Air and Space Intelligence Centre. We're talking to people from the DIA. You guys, we know exactly who you are. I know your names.
Ooh.
And sooner or later, we're going to name you. And you're going to be identified as people who are involved in criminal...
Name them now. You got such big, hairy, Australian fucking outback balls. Name them now. You're so fucking tough. You want to fucking talk about insubordination and treachery and a crime against humanity. You're the asshole that knows this fucking location of this spaceship, alien spaceship so big it can't be moved. What should we do with you when that's uncovered? Should we stone you and drag you behind the Humvee for all to see? Because you hid it from us? Because why? You wanted to protect your sources. Yeah, you can still do that. And still tell us where it is, right? Especially if it's multiple sources. This guy's such an asshole.
And you're going to be identified as people who are involved in criminal activities against the American public. And frankly, if the rest of the mainstream media doesn't cover it, I'm happy. Because frankly, there is a multi-million audience out there that is...
And there it is. There's multi-millions of dollars out there that the mainstream media isn't collecting in on. If they could only just push this bullshit, they would have the biggest clickbait fest ever. If they could just say what we're saying here on the Good Trouble Show on CNN, holy fuck, could you imagine what would be trickling down to us then, Matt Ford? They want this mystery. They crave it. They need it. Because without the mystery, there are no dollars. That is the truest shit he said ever.
Because frankly, there is a multi-million audience out there that is...
I think he wanted to say a multi-million dollar industry. Who says a multi-million audience? He had to correct. It's a multi-million dollar industry. Just look at his book sales. And this idiot's YouTube numbers. Just look at them. He won't show you, but there's ways you could look it up. All right, let's listen to this stupid clip.
This final statement from Lue Elizondo is absolutely the most disturbing thing.
To add
insult to injury, I was notified
I just
yesterday
love listening to Matt Ford's whiny. He sounds almost like the teachers from Peanuts. You know, the Charlie Brown. Wah, 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 but it's just a little higher pitched, very nasally. And this is the most appalling thing of all. To add insult, quote, to add insult to injury.
a personal threat against myself and several other whistleblowers formerly associated with the UAP effort for the U.S. government. As such, I would like to make this perfectly clear to the American people.
Clear.
I am not prone to accidents. I'm not suicidal. I'm not abusing drugs. I am not engaged in any illicit activities.
Like, just like the time, remember when you guys said I was drinking beers on Kerchai Mongol when it was really a beer bottle filled with apple juice? Remember that?
If something happens to me or my family members, my family members in the future, you will know what happened.
No, we won't, because you have not made it clear who the fuck you're talking about. So we'll have no clue what happened. If you actually drive yourself off of a bridge because, I don't know, you popped one too many Ambien the night before, how are we going to know what happened? Who do we turn our attention to in that scenario based off of this? What do we yell, Kirkpatrick? Is it going to be Kirkpatrick's fault? This is just, there's no specificity in this. Yeah, you want people to rally? Rally to what? If somebody breathes on you and you catch a cold, who do we blame? Arrow? ATIP? AIM-SOG? Who?
You will know what happened. I want everybody to just stop and think for a moment
about
that statement from Lue Elizondo.
Oh, boy.
I mean, this is coming from a former high-ranking and decorated member of the intelligence community, a guy much like David Grush and others that have literally sacrificed everything for...
They retired. Both of them retired from their posts. Nobody forced them out. And that is shown by the emails that have been uncovered through FOIA. He volunteered to quit. Both of them. Because it's a multi-million audience out there.
For this country. People like Lue Elizondo and David Grush that have in many ways thrown away their career, thrown away literally everything to put...
Literally everything. No, again, they retired under their own volition. Nobody forced them out because of their UFO secrets. People might have been going, what the fuck is this guy on about? He keeps talking about these goddamn UFOs, and he don't even have access to that. Does he even... I bet there was a lot of that going on. Questioning, what the fuck is this idiot talking about? But nobody forced them to go anywhere. Nobody made them throw their lives away.
To put country before themselves, country in many ways before their families.
Just
this final statement from Lue...
I mean, how much judgment can I pass when that was literally me 2 years ago? A little less than 2 years ago. The only difference is there weren't orbs following me home. And I also didn't suck. And I at least questioned Lue. You might as well have Lue Elizondo's hand up the hole that controls his mouth. If Lue Elizondo was under real threats, why not report it to the people that can look into that and actually help? If Lue Elizondo was under threats and worried for his life and wanted to make a public statement like this and say use Matt Ford's Good Trouble Show to announce this, at the very least add some specificity so people can know where to look if something does happen. Which, by the way, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen to Lue Elizondo. Just like nothing happened to Bob Lazar. I wonder why. It's really not that hard. This answer is staring you right in the face. So many silly things that were said. God, dude. Interesting. So here's something. I'm curious what you guys have to say. Burnham says lose a shill. Lue Elizondo is full of Linda Molton Howe, Lazar, and the tunnel guy with the hammy hand, all rolled into one now. Bob lying this long has been crazy. I don't know how he does it. Yeah, for reals. Why are people talking about Fessler? Anyway, I wanted to talk about this space that somebody brought to my attention, and when I was working this morning, I went ahead and took a listen to it, and it was around the 2:10 mark. Now, I've highlighted my issues with this guy, Doomer Daddy, before in the past. When you're describing people as pests and things that should be taken care of and, you know, be rid of, and basically dehumanizing people. And then on the flip side of that, holding spaces like this. Now, I didn't have time to go through this and edit it. There is a lot here. This is basically a conversation that was hosted by Doomer and this person, fringe.com. And they were talking to this guy, Steve, 7-945-459-334. That's his handle. When you go to Steve's handle, there's really nothing here. But the thing that he has tweets or posted here was something that he brought up in this discussion. Now, oh man, this discussion goes so many different places. I wanted to sort of play this part here and see if we get to hear what I heard around this mark. And that is that this guy's got a very long story. He claims to be part of a retired military. He worked for a independent contractor, you know, in the intelligence world, and claims to have stumbled on to the UFO program. And when he revealed this to his bosses, first he went to his boss, and his boss was like, okay, can I call my boss and tell him exactly what you told me? And he was like, yeah, let's do that. Let's talk to your boss. Went to his boss's office. The next day, they made him do a psych evaluation with a psychiatrist that was on site. He admittedly takes a break because it was a lot for him to handle. Then about a month later, gets back into this belief system of his, and this time stumbles onto something that he shouldn't have been talking about out loud. He gets fired and basically has to sign an admission of why he's being let go. He obviously, this causes trouble for him in his family life with his wife and children. And at one point, he gets in touch with Anjali. And Anjali has a big part to do with this, because Anjali was one of the main people that he was using as an example to his superiors and his colleagues as a credible source of information. And naturally, his colleagues were looking at him like, stop. Please stop talking about this, because then we're going to have to do something. And then eventually they did. And it was after this note that he claims was sent to him. I can't remember if it was Mother Gaia, which he claims to have spoken to, or another entity that goes by the name of Malachi. And this is the message that he gave to his boss. Okay. The message was, if you don't speed up or allow this awakening, we will. And that was a message from the people that were talking to him. He relayed this to his boss. So you can understand, I think any person can understand how this can send someone's life who's thinking these things into an absolute tailspin. He gets in touch with Anjali. Anjali advises him to not, because I think what was going on is his family and his work colleagues were advising him to seek therapy and professional help and maybe even admit himself. Instead, he calls Anjali, who says, no, don't do that. I'll get you a hotel. Come out here and just heal yourself here. And so he takes her up on the offer. He ends up wandering the streets for 3 days in the ice cold weather because he can't remember his hotel number, his room number. He's got the hotel key. He just can't remember the number. Nobody asks him, so why didn't you go to the hotel lobby and say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm staying here. I just can't remember my room number. I'm having a rough day, or whatever the excuse is. No, instead he wanders the streets for 3 days, talking to Mother Gaia and Malachi, and meeting people on the streets that he's helping with messages that only he can hear. And meanwhile, you've got Doomer Daddy. Oh, you're so brave. What was Mother Gaia saying? Oh, I'm kind of got a beef with her because she made you stay out in the cold for 3 days. Do you think it was a test? Yeah, it was definitely a test. And I don't know if I passed, man. I ask myself this question all the time. And just this reinforcement of this wild, wild idea. It was wild. Absolutely wild. I'm not going to include the link to this because I don't want to share this shit. But I do want to highlight it. So it's tough. How do I do that? Because I think people should know. Because a lot of people don't know what happens in these kinds of spaces, or either that or just really aren't listening to what's happening. So I'm going to let a little of this play and stop it where I went, oh, shit.
hopefully I'm not skipping too much. I'm not leaving anything out that's
No,
good.
take your time. The humor thing was helpful. Like it's hilarious that this guy
Yeah,
has a
yeah,
personality.
yeah. You know, he says mantis beings. There are no mantis beings. Right? Oh well, maybe there are. You know, so it shall be. You know. So anyway, we get there. We get to the congresswoman's office. And it's as if I know exactly where I'm going. I've never been to this place in my life. I walk in the building, right? I go immediately to the assembly room, okay, where people meet, and there's a podium, right? I go to the podium and I stand at parade rest. And I'm at parade rest for the next hour. Okay, I'm out of shape and I'm about to fall over, right? I'm standing there so damn long.
Oh
And so what is
my.
being told to me as I'm standing there is that there is this congresswoman. She is explaining to a very famous podcaster. So she is explaining to him what is going on, right? She is telling the people, I guess the people of the world, right, what is happening, and with respect to the program. Okay, so basically, it's like a truth and reconciliation moment, right? And I can't hear it, right? I can't hear what's being said, but it's being described to me that this is what's happening. And meanwhile, I'm standing at parade rest, right? While Malachi is giving me the the narrative.
And what
Okay.
is parade rest? I'm sorry, I have no idea what that means.
Yeah, so it's in the military, right? It's when you stand with your hands behind your back, and it's not a comfortable position, right? But it's not standing at attention, it's standing parade rest, right, with your arms behind your back. So you can't move. I couldn't move. I couldn't look around. I couldn't even move my eyes. I could not move.
Wait a second. So Malachi is forcing you in that position?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And it's not like I was fighting it. I was, he told me to go along with it, so I was going along with it. But at the same time, I didn't have control. Right. I could sense I did not have control. And so eventually, right, as I'm standing there, people from my life start popping into this group chat. Okay. Oh, and also, I'm sorry, I forgot one important point. Let me back up just a little bit. As I'm driving there to this office, right, I am told that there is the negative NHI that are on this planet. They will be visibly exposed all in one moment. Okay, for the world to see. And I said, well, this is, of course, this is news to me. I've never even heard of this. I asked, will there be violence? Right? What will happen when that occurs? And they said to me, there will be violence at a local level, right? But this negative NHI, they would be allowed to leave. Okay, so exposed but allowed to leave, and so that I thought that was a
Steve,
key
what does
point of
that
what they told.
mean? What does that mean? There will be violence at a local level.
They said, like, basically, if a family member or a friend that you see is all of a sudden revealed to be negative NHI, or they're in the same room as you, right? All of a sudden, like, there will naturally be violent reactions from some people, right, in the population.
Wow.
But
Okay.
meaning there's not going to be some formal, there won't be, like, this. The positive NHI is not going to kill them all. Okay, that's what they meant, right? Is that they will be allowed to leave.
Now, can you imagine this guy's in the intelligence community telling this to his boss, and his boss sits there patiently for an hour and says, "Hey, can we go to the other room? Let's talk to my boss. I just want him to hear this, so that way, when we do get rid of you, everybody understands why, and there's no confusion."
There will be understandable reactions, right, from people who are seeing this for the first time.
Yeah. Okay. Natural consequences that proceed from that. That's sort of what that.
Yeah.
You said Malachi
Yeah, so
calls them out by name. Are you talking about humans or NHI?
Oh, no, people in my life. Wait. Yeah, sorry. So people in my life started I'm sorry, I'm going back to parade rest now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so
yeah. Go ahead.
after he tells me that the congresswoman is explaining the program, right, leveling with the people, people from my life start to pop up. Okay, they're in this. They start to show up in this group chat that's in my mind. Okay, and one of them was my ex-girlfriend from
Uh-oh.
20 years ago, right? And I was not the best boyfriend, and that stuff started popping up, right? So essentially she's like, I don't want to say confronting, but it's like all of a sudden all these people there were no more secrets, and people had access to everyone's wrongs, and she was the first one that popped up, and I couldn't hear her, but I could hear Malachi respond to her, and Malachi was like, yes, John was wicked, right? He did many things he should not have done, right? But you need to forgive him, right? You do not have to love him, but you need to forgive him. And then all of a sudden these other people were popping up, right? And I couldn't take it. Okay, I could not take this guilt and shame, right, that was kind of being forced on me. And then on top of that, my youth minister, he pops up. So it's almost like I was on TV, right? It's like I was standing there at parade rest, and it's like I all of a sudden people are seeing me on TV for the first time, and they're like, "Oh my God, that's Steve," right? And so like they're like, that's kind of like the sense I was getting, is that people saw I was involved in whatever this thing was with the congresswoman. They saw my involvement in it, and so they were kind of jumping into this group chat, right? That we could all access. Like everyone was somehow telepathically linked, right? So to
be clear, he held a clearance while he believed all of this. He claims to have held a was it GS-15 or GS-13, something like that. Pretty high level classification. And he worked in intelligence for a few years. Did 4 years in the Army, came out, got his college degree with the GI Bill, and then started working in subcontracting intelligence. So, yeah. Again, these are all... I have no idea who this guy is. He's not putting his real name out there. This is just the whims of a madman, essentially. Or not a madman. We don't know if he's mad. But he's very anonymous, and he's not giving us his real name, and he's not giving us any specifics as far as the programs that he found, the places he worked in. Again, no specificity, but the amount of edge of the seat, the times I heard, oh my God, this sounds like a movie script in this conversation, at least 4 or 5 times. And every time it was said, I was like, yeah, it sounds like a fucking movie script. Exactly. And it wasn't even that interesting of a movie script. It was a movie script that had no specificity or details. I have no idea where he worked, what his home life was like. Like, no clue whatsoever.
The revelation of the negative NHI, they were exposed, and then somehow we were all telepathically linked, and that's what I was experiencing, right? Was this all of us coming online for the first time?
And do you view it as like a life review? And keep on going. I can ask that later too.
Yeah, it does sound like a life review, right? And I think it's interesting. I wasn't just told this. I believed I was experiencing it at the time. Like I thought I was going through the shit. I thought this was really happening, right? So this my old youth minister, he pops up into this group chat, and I hear Malachi address him. He says, David, right? He says, if your mind does not bend, it will break, right? And Malachi said, David was having a hard time with this, with what was going on, because this is not something out of the Bible, right? This is something completely different from what anyone could predict what would happen. And yeah, if his mind does not bend, it will break. So he needs to be flexible in appreciating the situation. And then of course my mom came on, and and then Malachi was like, yes, Steve was not was not crazy after all, right? There was something to this, right? He is involved in this, right? That type of thing.
So other people are being held accountable too. It's not just you, right? Other people.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. This was some kind of karmic, reconciliation that we all have to go through when we're connected, telepathically. And also too, I was specifically told we could have more conversation, more than one conversation, which I found interesting. Well, you can have multiple conversations at once. So I don't know how that plays with time or how our mind works, but I thought that was interesting.
And the mind bending, was that, do you felt that advice was applied to you, that the mind needs to bend, or who was that for?
No, that was for my youth minister.
Your youth minister
for sure.
needs to bend. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't have to reveal it if it's too intimate, but did he have like a rigid minded structure? Did that make sense to you?
No, I mean, he's I'm sure he is pretty. I guess he would be considered rigid when it comes to his biblical interpretation of how the world works, right? So so the group chat happens, and then now eventually I'm told, okay, it's over, right? The congresswoman, she's done. Aphrodite, right? She is done explaining to the world what's going on. And so and then around that same time, Malachi starts messing with me. He says, Steve thinks he's losing it, right? He thinks he's losing his mind. Okay. And then, so he says that, and then, I feel like a minute.
He almost sounds like Quentin Tarantino. He's like, okay, right, uh-huh, right, okay. Like, after every sentence.
Or two later, he says it again. He's like, Steve is really losing it. He's having a hard time with this. And so as I'm walking out, right, as I'm at a parade rest, I'm now walking out of the damn office building. I'm walking down the stairs, and Malachi says he thinks he's losing it. Let's see if it's true. As soon as he says that, I gain full control. I don't hear any voices, and it's as if none of this had just happened. And meanwhile, at that exact moment, I get a text from my work. Okay. And my work is saying, hey, where are you? You were supposed to come in this morning. We need to talk, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just dumbfounded. I'm like, what just happened to me? I spend about 20 minutes in my car, and then I go to the hospital. I'm sorry. I spend 20 minutes in my car, and I'm thinking, I gotta go to the hospital. Like I have totally lost it. I'm hearing voices, right? Like this thing that supposedly happened did not happen. I call my family. I'm like, hey, I got to go away for a while, right? Because I'm just, and then meanwhile, my work texts me at the exact moment I get control, right? So I'm thinking maybe there's something going on here I don't understand, right? Like why did I get a text at the exact moment? Meanwhile, like I said, I just got told that, there's intelligence, central intelligence wizards are messing with the timeline. So I feel like I'm just thrown in the middle of this, and at the same time, I'm losing my mind. So I get to the hospital, and I text a few people before I get there. Anjali is one of those people, and I'm 20 feet from the hospital entrance. I parked my car in the garage, right, 20 feet from the entrance, and Anjali says to me, she texts me back. She said, hey, I just got your message, right? She said, do not go into the hospital, right? She's like, they will commit you, right? If you go into that.
He's 20 feet away from entering the hospital and getting control of his life. And she texts him 20 feet away from that, saying, do not go in there. They're going to commit you. So what does he do?
Going to that hospital. She said, why don't you come out to me, right?
The lady who saw aliens in a fucking mountain that doesn't exist, who also worked for the State Department on some level.
Right. And, I'll give you a safe space to stay, right, while you process like what's happening to me. or what's happening to you. So that's what I end up doing, right? We coordinate, me and Anjali, we coordinate me getting out to where she lives, right on the other side of the country, and I try to make the journey out there. So I think this is a good place for me to pause and maybe take a sip of water.
He does this a lot in this interview. He's like, this is a good moment for me to pause and take questions or take a sip of water. And everybody's like, wait, what? Why are we taking questions here? No, that's cool. You can keep going. Nobody's got any questions right this second.
I think we're all taking a sip of water right now, Steve.
Yeah, Duma's just so fucking fat. He's just so edge of his seat, man. He cannot wait to fucking just double down on this guy's story and confirm for Steve his belief systems. He cannot wait.
Okay.
Sip slowly. Friend, I'll always let you go first because I'm talking a lot.
I'll just wait to see where Steve wants to. Is there a place to go from here, Steve, or is this essentially the?
There
okay,
is.
Let's just
go
to that.
I can go ahead.
Okay, can I?
I just need probably another 10 minutes to wrap it up.
Yeah, can I ask two questions like that are relevant just to this timeline here?
Sure.
So when Steve says Steve thinks he's losing it, let's see if it's true. He's talking about you in third person, which
yes,
he's not speaking to anybody. He's just being comedic and sardonic in his wit. Who is he talking to?
I mean, well, he was just talking to everybody I knew in my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't, and also too, he was having communication with the congresswoman, right? So I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know how to answer that.
But did you view that? I found that moment the most hilarious of all. If he was talking to you and he's the voice in your head, which would make most people.
Yeah.
I thought that was the most meta joke that you could ever have, especially in.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I want to pause it here for a second because I just got a really great message. I was actually asking Andres for this, and he sent me a link here, and I'm going to share this link. And he goes, "Hey Lou, you asked me for a resource for folks who may need professional help, like abductions or the kind of person you're talking about in your show right now that was on a space with Anjali. Here's the link to the International Society for Trauma and Dissociation. I'm a member of it myself. This would be the best place to look for trauma therapists who also know how to work with dissociation and other related conditions, which often overlap with the things we talk about. Hope this helps." And Andres, if you want, I'll send you, if you got time, if you want to pop in to the show and sort of drop in to call in, I'll send you a link right now. No pressure. If you don't have time or if you can't, no problem. But yeah, if you do have time, I'd like to get sort of your thoughts and input on this kind of situation. Go ahead. I'm DMing you right now. Go ahead. And I also want to share this link with everyone here. Yep. Just showed my emails to everyone. That's great. Okay. Let's go ahead and share this link. So that's the link right there for the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation. If you know anybody who's suffering from this kind of trauma or dissociation, if there's a way for you to sensitively, send them this link or suggest this link for someone to talk to instead of fucking Doomer Daddy, this is a great link. I think I'm going to start including this link in every single one of my show notes. So this will always be in our show notes. So if you ever lose it or forget what it is, you could always come to our show notes and find it there starting today. So yeah. Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, I know. Later, I'll get into it, but later he apologized. He said he shouldn't have done that.
He says that?
Which I found that funny, you know, that he would apologize later. So yeah.
And what is he communicate to the congresswoman? He's just communicating the message that she's going to pass on to the world, explaining disclosure and everything, or is there something else happening?
Yeah, no, I think that's what was going on. Like, he activated her, right? That's my sense was that he activated her, and he told me that she's having a hard time with it, right? She's having a hard time accepting it,
Accepting
that accepting that Aphrodite is some entity within her or whatever.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, I'm hoping that Congresswoman, right, is you know, Lue. I think Lue went to DC this week. So I'm hoping this congresswoman in her duties is getting those briefings by Lue. That would be amazing. If that's true, that would be amazing to me. So, you know, we'll see. You know, who knows, right? If she has a role to play in all this, but if she does, that would be incredible.
And what do you make of the Aphrodite thing? I mean, that seems very vague to me. Can you just spitball here? What do you make of the whole Aphrodite thing?
I don't know. I go back to Tom DeLonge's Greek gods, right? Mention and that maybe they never left, right? And also too, I was told. So eventually, and I'm getting there, but the second entity talks to me. There's only two. The second one is a female, and she goes by the name Mother Gaia. Okay. And she tells, what does she tell me? She tells me, I lost my train of thought. She I'm sorry, I forget.
Steve, take your time. Like, this is amazing. I'm on the edge of my seats here. This whole thing feels like a movie, by the way. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah. That's right.
This whole thing feels like a movie. It's incredible. Yes. Of course it feels like a movie.
They have been asleep.
Of course it feels like a movie. By the way, we're going to be getting in Andres here in a second. He said he's able to hop in, so that'll be cool to get him in here. And we could talk about this here until probably the end of the hour. Because, yeah, this is what we're up against. Like, it really is. It's tough to... Andres, how are you? Welcome. Thanks for being here on such short notice.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So you sent me this link, which I truly appreciate. And like I said, I'm going to include this link in the show notes after the show, and going forward, making sure that this link is in all show notes going forward, just, you know, so that way we always have a place to point people that's a little more reliable than Twitter Spaces. But I am curious, you know, you heard what was going on. I'm assuming you listened to this interview. Did you get a chance to listen to the whole thing, or just what we've played here?
Just what you've played so far.
Okay. Yeah, with the backstory that I gave for this gentleman, and what was going on, I mean, it seemed clear to me that he was having these issues at work, and then work was like, buddy, I think we should try and get you some help. And he basically refused it. And it seems like that also got him in trouble at work, because he lost his job. He lost his income. He was one of the main sources of income. It was just really like the preface right before we got to this part where he's 20 feet away from the emergency room. You know, and then he gets a text from Anjali saying, no, don't do that. Come see me. We'll take care of you. You know, like, what do you think's happening here based off of the limited information that I've given you?
Well, number one, what Anjali is doing is extremely irresponsible, considering that she probably has absolutely no idea what he's experiencing. So the fact that she would just take at face value anything that he's told her he's experiencing without him at least getting, you know, seen or talk to a physician or a therapist, is just so irresponsible. Because I know Anjali has had her own experiences, but that doesn't mean that just any old Joe down the street's experiences are also going to be real ones. So she herself, even though she's an experiencer, should take into account that sometimes people have hallucinations or experiences that are generated by their own minds, and that should be always what you rule out first. when it comes to him, I can't comment. I can't speculate on his mental health because of our code of ethics.
Right.
But definitely is the kind of thing that you should talk to someone first. You should get checked out, and it's not necessarily mental health. It could also be substance abuse. I work with people who use meth all the time, and after 3 days of not sleeping, they can have experiences like these, just like anyone else, without a
Right.
mental illness. But absolutely, the idea that you would find a group of people who are just going to reinforce everything you're experiencing can be extremely dangerous. And I see that all the time with the gang stalking community, where instead of getting help, they find other people who experience gang stalking, and then they just end up reinforcing their own beliefs. And suddenly you have an entire, subreddit full of people who think they're being followed by the government or someone else. It's just so irresponsible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wasn't in that space, but if you do find yourself in a space like that, is there anything that someone can say or do to maybe sort of, I don't know. I know we talked about this before, right? Trying to provide solutions, and sometimes people just want you to hear their pain, and I get that. But I mean, in a situation like this, is there any way to add some levity or rationality without coming off as a dick, I guess?
Yeah.
You know?
I was thinking about it too, because I thought, well, if I was listening to that space and I got called on to speak as a therapist myself, how do you tell someone or suggest to them that maybe it would be in their best interest to speak to someone without them thinking that what you're saying is you're mentally ill, go get checked, because that's how it comes across. My approach would be to ask, not tell someone you need to get help. It's to ask them, do you think it might be a good idea for you to at least speak to someone who is a professional? The worst thing that could do is tell you that there are conditions like these that our brains have sometimes that generate experiences like this, but sometimes you could even just tell them, at least so you yourself can rule out mental illness. So asking them so that it becomes their idea to go see someone, rather than them feeling like someone is pushing them in that direction, because that's the easiest way to get pushback. People don't want to hear that they're mentally ill. But asking in such a way that makes them feel like it's genuinely their idea to go, just for the sake of just covering their own base. That would be my approach, and even that would be really tricky because I'm just a stranger.
Yeah, no, it is very tricky. And yeah, like I think, especially for this last week, I've definitely removed myself from a lot of these conversations, just because, might as well just take that temptation of wanting to try and help out of the situation. Because if I'm not there, then I won't have that temptation to do it. But somebody did reach out to me, and said, hey man, you got to listen to this space. Like, this one is pretty wild, and sort of the things that are reinforced in there are fascinating, to say the least. But like you said, in the case of Anjali, it's dangerous, like just straight up dangerous. Somebody was asking here, and I kind of want to take a shot at this based off of our previous conversations, but someone was asking gang stalking, ? As if they didn't understand what that was. So if I could take a stab, I'd say gang stalking is this idea, like you just kind of previously said, where somebody convinces themselves that they're being stalked by either someone or something, like the CIA or the government, or I don't know what other sort of people would do this kind of stalking, where they think they're getting followed by helicopters and black cars. Is that what the gang stalking mentality is? And just like the UFO community and abductions, it's reinforced by communities similar to the UFO community, where they've got now gang stalking communities where other people who also believe they're being followed can talk to other people. Is that about right?
Yeah. And who is doing the stalking is always going to be different from person to person. I have worked with people who thought it was aliens doing the stalking. Sometimes it's just normal street gangs. Sometimes it's them, a nebulous them. If anyone's interested, if you on YouTube, later you could type in gangstalking or targeted individuals documentary. There's a short 15-minute Vice documentary that they did that's very helpful to understand what it is that they experience. But yeah, it's literally that. Sometimes it's caused by sleep deprivation. Sometimes it's just delusional disorder. It's very tough to work with that because there's very little way to convince them that it's not happening.
Well, he was saying, the things that I was picking up on were the amount of stress he was under. And it was particularly when he got to Anjali's place, they put him up in a hotel. And then he just disappeared for 3 days, wandering the streets in the cold weather because he forgot because he was under so much duress and stress, he forgot his hotel number. And so therefore he didn't even bother to go to like the hotel lobby or call somebody and say, hey, I'm sorry. I know this sounds crazy, but can you remind me of my hotel number again? Instead he decided to wander the streets. So I'm not sure if a hotel was really had for him or he's just saying that and he was just really wandering the streets for 3 days. It's kind of tough to decipher, okay, what part of this is... I definitely believe he was wandering the streets for 3 days, but how did he get there? I think is kind of where I'm like, oh man, I'm struggling with.
Yeah, I'm kind of that all the time when working with individuals, especially gangstalking individuals. They'll tell you many different stories. Some of them seem perfectly, yeah, I can see that happening. But then there's some parts where you don't know where, I hate to say this word, the delusion starts and and ends versus what part is an actual memory that got that the delusion like kind of added to the memory. So in like cases like his, it is absolutely perfectly possible that he may have imagined or had a delusion that he was going to go to a hotel. That part could have been real. It's very hard to tell it apart, even when talking to them. But the worst thing that could happen to someone like that is to essentially end up on the streets. And I see that every day at work, homeless individuals with mental illness. And then of course the police will harass them for any reason they can find, and they end up in jail. And
that's even worse for that.
Yeah. But it doesn't surprise me that Anjali would, that's what she would encourage, because in part it reinforces her own story and her own experience. So it's in her best interest to kind of suggest that.
Well, what do you think's, again, like we can't diagnose people based off just their public appearances, but we best guess, I mean, what do we think's happening there with Anjali and sort of her claims and her stories and the fact that she believes she can get people healed? Like, and this is, I got, Andreas, I cannot tell you how much shit I got. And I will never take this question back because I think it's a good question. She claims to have been healed by these beings. And then she goes, she comes out of a cancer treatment or some sort of treatment because she is a sick woman. She's a very sick woman. And my question to her was, well, why didn't they fix all of you? Why didn't they heal everything? Why do you still have to go to these therapy sessions if they're your friends? Why don't they just heal you? And man, I got a lot of shit for that question. But it's just like, well, look, if you're going to be texting people that are 20 feet away from the fucking ER room, like, I'm sorry if my question is insensitive, but you're convincing people to not go seek help.
Yeah. I think when I read that you asked her that, partially it's how you asked it.
Oh, definitely.
And even even if she were my client, I would have the same question in my mind, but I would struggle to know how to ask it in a way that doesn't come across as confrontive or combative.
Right.
Because what I want them to do is actually think about the question and thoughtfully, not see the question like that and see it as an attack and then just block you. Or with Anjali, again, it's tricky to talk about this. So Charlie Weiser also
I'll just say real quickly with Anjali, she's lied so much that at some point, like, I hit a wall where I'm like, all right, I'm just going to ask her a very blunt question. You know, it's not going to be sugar coated whatsoever, just to expose the bullshit in what she's saying. But I'm not a doctor, you know, or I'm not a clinical therapist. Rather, like I sometimes I don't have the kid gloves because like it infuriates me when I hear stories like the one this guy just told of how many other people were 20 feet away from the emergency room and she stopped them from going in there. And then that's the part that makes me mad. Like, what if that was a cancer patient? What if that was my grandmother who was 20 feet away from getting her therapy session, and that because she didn't go in there because Anjali said, hey, come to a hotel, I'll take care of you, I'll heal you, she doesn't do it, and then she's dead 3 months later because of this woman. Like, how many, genuinely, how many people has that happened to? And where's your anger for them? Where's the outrage for those people? Here we have an actual confession from somebody, which tells me if there's one, there's definitely others that she's done this to.
Here's why I have a hard time getting angry at Angelie, even with situations like these.
Yeah.
Because I believe that she herself needs help.
Right.
I believe that the memory that she has described of the alien beings in that mountain didn't happen until 2 years after the actual event. And it from what I've gathered from Charlie Weiser's research, there was what's it called in California? You guys, was it in California? Some dabs involved, some extremely potent THC.
Yeah. She was in Nevada, I think, where it happened. But yeah, she was doing some very concentrated doses of THC, which I feel like I've done those kinds of doses too, and I've never hallucinated once off that kind of thing. You know, but
depends on the person's tolerance for sure.
That's true too, right? Yeah.
And the fact that nothing about aliens was said until 2 years later tells me that this is a false memory, a very clear case of that. I don't know if she ever did hypnotic regression, but it's a false memory. And I absolutely do generally believe she hears the voices that she claims to hear. And I do generally believe that those voices do identify themselves as extraterrestrials, because I work with voices that talk as if they're spirits or ETs all the time. Yeah. So she is, I believe her, but the problem is you have one sick person telling other sick people not to get help. So if this was, you know, a normal person who has no signs of mental illness at all, I would have a lot of rage and righteous anger towards them. But with Anjali, it's well, I have to have compassion for her too, even though she is hurting others.
So do you think there's any level of her at all that's aware of this, or you think she's completely bought into her own delusion?
I don't want to say it's a delusion. I do. It's a memory coupled with voices that she hears. So the voices are real. The memory to her is real. I think, I absolutely do believe she's a true believer. I don't see any. She doesn't strike me as the grifting type. I
just see, like, when I listen to interviews of her, there's moments when she knows she's being caught in a lie, and her response to it is usually anger. Is usually to get upset and to sort of deflect. And if she's in control, she'll just get rid of the person. If she's not in control, she'll take control by either leaving the conversation or making the person, you know, like making the situation so awkward that they just have to move on. So like when in moments like that, I'm like, man, like what's happening there? What's going on?
I think she's reacting the same way that any of us react.
To new information?
It depends on, no, to being caught in an inconsistency. I don't know if she sees it as a lie. It's an inconsistency, because I did watch an interview she did with another UFO researcher, I forget his name, where he did ask her really nicely and politely, while kind of giving her a hug, what happened when one of her prophecies did not come to pass about, you know, a day when the I don't know exactly what it was, but because he asked her so nicely and he was clearly on her side, she was able to actually say, I don't know. I'm still figuring it out myself. So I could see that she's confused. But if that same question is asked by more kind of hostile person, then that's how we tend to react. It's I'm being attacked.
Yeah.
I don't think she's lying deliberately. I think she's extremely confused. And imagine hearing voices who are telling you this stuff all the time. And well,
you know what it makes me
believe them.
What makes me think of that, I'm sure you've seen this movie, A Beautiful Mind, with Russell Crowe.
Yes.
And he gets to a point where he realizes, oh, they're not aging. The people in my head are not aging. And then that's how he's able to decipher, you know, the real people he's seeing versus the things he's manifesting himself.
Yes.
So how does science measure how visceral these, like, is it as when somebody hears a voice in their head or when somebody sees a vision, is it as visceral and as real as they portrayed in that film? I mean, are they hearing these things crystal clear, or is it like, oh, wait a second, did I just hear that? Or these are like crystal clear voices that they're hearing?
Yeah, so that movie, the visual hallucinations are extremely rare. I actually have never worked with anyone who had visual hallucinations to that extent.
Yeah.
But the auditory hallucinations are as real as my voice is to you right now. And in fact, sometimes I can even ask the person, where in the room is the voice coming from? And they will be able to tell me where it is spatial temporally located somewhere in that room. So some people hear them with their ears, but some people hear them in their minds. And I actually have a person I'm currently working with who committed a heinous act because one of these voices told her to. And this voice identified itself as a non-human intelligence, kind of like an alien. And she's still, after a year of this happening, and even after a year of therapy, she's still torn as to whether or not it was a real entity or if it was a product of her mind. And so recently I had a session with her where I did a hypnotic technique where I can speak to her unconscious and I can teach her how to speak to her unconscious. And she asked her unconscious, is this voice real? And the unconscious said no. And she says, how can I know that for sure? And her own unconscious was able to tell her, remember the lies. That is one huge strategy to use when working with voices. They lie all the time. And if you can ask and get people to see the sheer number of times the voices have told you lies and things that were inaccurate, that starts getting that puts them on the path to finally start questioning them rather than take everything they say at face value.
You see,
Anjali is obviously not there.
That's what I was thinking when I was listening to this conversation, because he was saying, oh, the loving Mother Gaia and this Malachi who are talking to them, it's all love, and he's the vessel to help these other people. But yet all of this helping and all of this goodwill put him on the street for 3 days and alienated him from his wife and children. What kind of God would do that to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question that in a therapy context would be useful for them to reflect on. So these voices are telling you these things that you have a calling, and yet what has been the result in your life since you started hearing these voices? Right. You ask a question like that and they can start put the pieces together. Shit, my life has gone to shit. Maybe they are full of shit. That's a good way to get them to actually stop taking them at face value. But imagine if you heard voices as clearly as my voice, just suddenly. We have to trust our senses in order to navigate the world. And if you're hearing voices, there's a part of your mind that's going to wonder, is this from out there or from inside my own mind?
Yeah.
And
what is, okay, man, I got so many questions on this, but what is, has science or this field, have they figured out exactly what's happening there? What is causing this? Is there any sort of correlations as far as trauma of the brain or where does this typically show up in people, and what are the early signs of it? Like are some of the conversations that you heard that I played today, would that be considered early signs? Like, hey man, like this could end up in a place where you're treating somebody like you're treating now, who actually hurts somebody in a heinous crime because they believe these voices so much.
Thankfully, most people with hallucinations and schizophrenia and stuff like that, they are not violent. They actually tend to have far higher rates of being victimized themselves than them
Wow.
actually committing crimes.
That's interesting.
And it's not necessarily the case that even if he's having this experience, it doesn't necessarily imply that these are early warning signs of like schizophrenia, because sometimes people have psychotic episodes that just last a brief amount of time. Sometimes they can be stress-induced psychosis. So as soon as the stress kind of goes away, they kind of revert back to normal. So that's why it's so tricky, and it's very dangerous to diagnose people just based on stuff like this, because you can't really diagnose them based on an episode.
Right.
In terms of what explains this, at least for schizophrenia, it tends to be partially genetic, partially environmental. There's no real understanding of exactly what the causes are, but there are some associations. And sadly, with schizophrenia, there's not always early warning signs. Typically, if a person's going to have it, it typically shows up in their early 20s. Sometimes either trauma will trigger it, or extreme stress, or substance use. Typically will be one of the major triggers if they're already predisposed to it. But I have met people who never had a single sign of it, and suddenly in their 50s, their wife dies, and suddenly they start hearing voices for the first time.
Yeah.
So sadly, there's not always signs that you can tell ahead of time.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say real quick that chat is going wild for you. This dude is fantastic to have on. Hearts. This Andres guy is great. Let's see here. This guy's ASMR. Let's see. Yeah, this guy's pretty good. So yeah, guys, we've had a couple of spaces with Andres already. One of them I posted on the YouTube channel. Yeah, he's amazing. and any second I can have him on the show, it's always amazing to have him on the show, because he's such a wealth of knowledge, especially when it comes to really dissecting what's happening with these dissociations and memory. How would I phrase that? Like a memory confusion, or sort of what's the phrase there?
Sometimes false memories.
False memories. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you, and I'm always happy to be on. And I just happened to have been listening to your show, and I remembered that you had asked for resources. And unfortunately, most of the resources that exist specifically for alien-related stuff tend to be like the John Mack Foundation or Barbara Lamb, people who are true believers who are only going to make things worse. But the Society for Trauma and Dissociation does really good work. They work with trauma, they work with dissociation, DID, and a lot of times, a lot of the stuff that we see in the UFO community is dissociation related. And so, for example, Angelie's voices, I suspect, I don't think she hears them with her ears. I think she hears them in her mind. And that's a really good sign that those are dissociated voices in her own mind.
And so what's the difference there? Is there one that's, say, more concerning or less concerning?
Nope, not necessarily. No? It is a different pathology. So the voices that people hear with their ears, if you put them on a brain scan, you will see that the part of the brain that actually lights up whenever you hear a real sound.
Is that typically the same part?
Yes.
Okay.
For what?
Well, when they hear voices within the brain, is it always coming from the same part of the brain?
Not coming from the same part. The same part of the brain that processes auditory signals lights up. So that shows you that they legitimately are hearing it as if they're hearing a real sound. Wow. For internal voices, like what I suspect Anjali has, it's a completely different case. Neither of them are more dangerous than the other. Schizophrenia voices tend to be a lot more negative. And it's not that hearing voices is what makes someone mentally ill. It's if the voices are so constantly distressing that they lead to your life just falling apart. Yeah. So lots of people hear positive voices, and like psychics do, for example, and they're not mentally ill. They're just positive voices. It's the negativity that makes people need help.
Let me ask you this. Has there ever been a schizophrenic or someone with this kind of mental illness that has received awesome advice where they like won the lottery or, you know, became like the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and they're like, yep, I did it thanks to me and my voice? Or is that just never happens?
I don't know specifically the things you mentioned, but there are people with schizophrenia who do sometimes have, in addition to negative voices, they have more positive, caring voices, nurturing voices. And if they tune into those more and they pay attention to them more, they do tend to do better than the ones constantly telling them to kill themselves or you're a piece of all the awful stuff.
Yeah.
The voices are never going to be able to tell you anything that your mind doesn't already know because it's coming from your mind. So if you don't know a piece of information, the voice is not going to give you a lottery number that's the winning number because you don't know the number. But yes,
and also the voice isn't connected to some ethereal, mysterious thing.
Correct. And there is another resource for people. The Hearing Voices movement is organization for people who hear voices who seeks to normalize the experience because more people than people realize hear voices, and it's not a mental illness to hear a voice. That the trouble is if they're so negative that they just destroy your life. That's why when it becomes a problem. But there are many people in that movement, the Hearing Voices movement, who talk about their voices being kind, that encourage them, and it is possible.
Well, let me ask you this then. So then what's the difference between that and like I have voices that I always just attribute to sort of like a conscious or sort of my inner voice saying, you know, my instincts or whatever, just saying, you know, thinking to myself, especially, or being, sometimes I'm really, really hard on myself, but they don't come to me as a clear voice or something I hear as, you know, as you're speaking with me now. So what's the difference between that and what people like Anjali are experiencing?
It might be the same thing. There's auditory voices that people hear with their ears, and then the rest of them are in the mind. So I have just one running monologue. I don't have a group of like chit chat in my head. It's just the one voice. But some people, let me back up. Every human being is made of parts of their personality. So in English and in Spanish, we say things like, part of me wants to do this, but another part of me wants to do that. That's more literal than people might imagine. And sometimes, specifically with trauma, the parts of our personality that are already there get dissociated so that suddenly some people are able to actually hear those parts talking to them in their own mind, and you can have conversations with them. This is extremely common. Those voices are pretty common, and it's not a mental illness. I suspect that's what you're referring to. If you can have conversations with them, but even though they sound just like you, what you might be experiencing are the different parts of your personality chiming in, like an inner critic, for example, or a younger part of yourself. Anjali's voices are slightly different in that they don't seem to be parts of our personality. They have taken on their own persona of being extraterrestrial beings of some sort. That does happen. It's really uncommon, but there's probably a good reason for why they took on those personas. That, you know, if you were to do therapy with someone like that, you would slowly uncover why did these voices take on that appearance. But I can only speculate in her case without her, you know, talking to me. But it's very common, and I suspect most people in the chat probably can relate to what you mentioned. Sometimes you hear your own voice in your own mind, but it doesn't feel like the thought belongs to you. That's a dissociated voice.
Wow, that's cool. So there's really not a difference other than it taking on almost like an individuality. It becomes something else other than a part of your personality. And so I'm assuming when you do therapy sessions with people who are having this issue, those are those the things that you tend to point out, like when you're having these sessions? Like, is there ever a point where it's like, hey, did you ever consider, you know, that most people hear voices in their head, but it's a part of their, like you said, like their personality. It's just a different part of themselves coming through and sort of and talking to itself. Whereas when it gets into this other area, you know, it's either alien or them or some other Gaia or Malachi or something like that. It comes in as its own form. I'm assuming that's usually probably, I don't know how easy it is for people to latch onto that or sort of be able to decipher their own voices with that kind of technique. But I mean, does that work?
It does. It first of all, framing it the way that you did helps normalize the experience for the person, because most people who hear something inside their own minds, like you described, probably will never talk about it because they're afraid of how they might be perceived. But I do tell people, most people hear voices. Most of the time, they just sound like ourselves, but sometimes they sound either like an older version of ourselves or a younger version. They're still parts of us. And sometimes what happens is when with enough trauma, sometimes those parts of ourselves that we recognize as parts of ourselves get so kind of pushed so far away from us that they suddenly start feeling like they are not a part of ourselves, even though they still are. Those are cases of extreme dissociation. The most extreme version of that is multiple personality disorder. But it's all kind of on a spectrum, and that is the first step that I always tell people. This is perfectly normal, and all human beings fall somewhere on that spectrum. And I talk to the voices themselves directly, because when I'm doing therapy, I'm not just doing therapy with that part of the personality, but with all of them. So I'll talk to the voices myself, and my goal typically is to bring the parts of the personality to work together as a team rather than kind of working at odds with one another, pulling in different directions. So if we can get the personality parts working as a coherent group, a cohesive group, typically the person starts doing much better in life rather than having this internal struggle.
Somebody was asking about, Gracie asked a question about, ask Andreas about people who don't have an inner voice. What about those freaks? What about
freaks.
those weird asses, huh? Like, I could not, honestly, I heard that the other day. I was like, what? That's a thing?
Yep.
I couldn't even imagine not, like, I had a director in our sketch show who was like, yeah, I don't hear anything. I don't talk to myself like that. She looks at us like we're the weird asses. I was like, wow, okay. But yeah, can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, there are people who don't have an inner monologue. There are also people who just don't have pictures in their minds. I'm kind of somewhere really close to that spectrum. I can barely form images in my head.
Really?
Yeah, it's very frustrating for me because if I picture something, it's very blurry, very, very
So
abstract.
like if I say Eiffel Tower, you have a hard time picturing that?
I see the general shape, but no details. Whereas some people can literally describe like the rust on the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, mine is very, the way my brain works is I think in words more than anything. Yeah, there are people who don't have that inner monologue. It's not a disorder. Most of the time they don't even realize that most people.
I'm going to tell you right now, you have a disorder. Go get some help. You don't have an inner monologue. You're a weird ass. I'm sorry. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I've actually met people who like suddenly realized, wait, I thought everyone's brain was like this. What do you mean you hear your own voice in your head? But they get by just fine.
I don't know about that. Name one person who doesn't have a great inner monologue. No, I'm kidding. Damn, that's wild. Okay, so then I know this is kind of off topic, but you did mention the word grifter, and you say, you don't look at Anjali as your typical grifter. You really believe that thing she's saying, she genuinely believes. And I'll take your professional sort of opinion on that. But who do you think... And I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Stephen Greer.
Stephen Greer.
Richard Doty.
Okay.
Richard Doty for sure. In terms of experiencers, I forget. Michael Herrera. I'm not sure.
Okay. What about like a Linda Molton Howe?
Oh, she's a true believer. I think absolutely 100%.
True believer.
So I think sometimes I'm not sure what it is that people mean when they use the word grifter, because a grifter typically, as I understand it, is someone who knows they're lying.
Correct.
Linda is a true believer, absolutely.
But she's also been caught in straight up. Well, she was caught using a video game cover as a real picture of an alien. And then when her attention was brought to it, she didn't correct the story.
That was really awkward. She just took the picture down. Yeah.
Yeah. Like she didn't say, hey, by the way, I got this wrong. Turns out it was this. So when I see stuff like that, it tells me, oh, she's not interested in updating her audience with truth. She's interested in updating her audience with the woo. And so I don't think I also look at her like speaking appearances and stuff like that. It's a lot of money to get Linda Molton Howe to do a movie or speak at your con or whatever. It's definitely a business for her.
Yeah. I think we have to be really careful in cases like that. A lot of people's immediate reaction is, oh, she knows she's lying and she got caught. But just remember that for a true believer like her, I'm sure that she generally believed that photo was a real alien. That's why she put it on her website. It's embarrassment. Having to admit that you were scammed or that you were had as a fool is really difficult. And so I don't think that she's lying about that picture. I think she generally believed that was a legit UFO picture. And when she got caught, she took it down. And she's not interested really in truth as in the way that a scientist would be. She's interested in that cause, but I don't think she's lying. I think Richard Doty absolutely is a sociopathic liar. Stephen Greer. I'm not so sure about Lue Elizondo. I think he generally believes this stuff for the most part.
Well, I think I'm definitely... I'm just based off of everyone that I've talked to about him, both off the record and on the record. I think also he is a believer, but he's also, he lies all the time. All the time about the silliest things too. That's the weirdest part. It's just the little lies that he tells for no reason are so strange that it makes you look at, like the things... For example, what do you take from what he wrote this last week in his life being in danger? Like, to me, I don't know. That screams like a cry for help, but I'm curious to know what you think.
So I commented on, what's his name, Osiris on Twitter. I was not a fan of him putting in that ChatGPT diagnosis based on what Lou said. Because even me, who has the credentials to diagnose someone, I would not do that because I know my own limitations, and you just cannot diagnose someone on little snapshots like that.
Right.
I think, as you are well aware, people get death threats all the time for the dumbest things. Like I play video games. The developers get death threats for updating a video game in a way that the community didn't like. I'm sure you've gotten some on Twitter by some just random person. I think it is perfectly reasonable to think, some random Twitter asshat sent him a death threat and he's playing that up for drama for his book sales. I don't think necessarily that he has to be lying, just because you don't have to lie about that. People get death threats all the time for the dumbest things.
Right. Yeah, I don't think he's lying either. It's not that it's a lie, but to me it's not as serious as he's making it out. I don't think it's super credible. Right. Because if it was, why not go to the authorities? Why not go to the lawmakers that and say, hey, I just got threatened by somebody within the Department of Defense. Like, what the fuck's going on? Like, I think he would have some legitimate gripes there. And, then you get these sort of fake journalists coming and backing him up on this, saying, oh, we know exactly who threatened him. And it's like, why just say it? Just say it.
To be fair to him, for all we know, he has done both. He has spoken to the proper authorities, or it's possible that they are the ones who informed him. So you can both talk about it in private with the authorities and blast it on Twitter. The reason he might not be able to say it is for the same reason that people typically don't name stuff like that. If there's an ongoing investigation, you don't talk about it. That seems to me to be a perfectly just boring, mundane reason that explains what we're seeing. I don't think he's lying. And I do think, how do we know he hasn't talked to someone behind the scenes?
So we've got some questions here for you. Everybody wants a diagnosis of Ross Coulthart.
No. I'm sorry, I didn't want to hijack your show.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, I was going to end the show early anyway. It's not like there was a ton to talk about. So you actually saved the show here. But as somebody asked, well, do you have a channel? Gracie asked, do you have a channel?
No, I do not.
Okay, or please. Okay, no. Somebody asks, ask him about Ross and his giant craft. Like, what about the claims that a person like Ross Coulthart makes? What do you think of those kinds of things? Like when he says, we should stone them to death and drag them behind Humvees, the people who are committing these crimes against humanity. Do you think that's helpful? That kind of rhetoric? And again, these are the people that are being used to defend this Lue Elizondo narrative of he's being, his life is being threatened. And it's also coming out of the same mouth that in another instance said we should be stoning and dragging people behind Humvees. So that's why when I see stuff like this, I'm like, I want to believe it, but you can understand why I don't.
Right. So no, obviously I don't think that's helpful, but I also know that the reason I don't think it's helpful is because I also don't think any of these claims are true. So I just think he's just saying stuff that riles people up for a falsehood. But if any of this were true, if there were people who had been hiding this from us for 80 plus years, I think most of us might actually feel the same way as he does if we believed that this was actually happening. But because we don't, we just see that shit as like he's inciting people over a falsehood, and that's dangerous. But if this were actually happening, who here would not want these people to suffer consequences? Maybe not drag them behind a Humvee, but definitely face repercussions. I think, I'm going to take off my therapist hat and put on my philosopher hat for him. In his case, I think he's just a dumbass. He believes anything that whatever his sources tell him is true. He doesn't ask for evidence. He just believes it. So in a case like that, I don't think he's lying, and I don't think he's ill. I think he just has really low standards of evidence, and he just passes on what he hears.
I gotta say, I love when you wear this philosopher hat. It's great. That's exactly what I was looking for. I agree with you. I think I look at history and what they've done in the past and their track record when it comes to making big claims. And when you look at Ross Coulthart and the really terrible reporting he did with the child abuse in Parliament, he got that story completely wrong, and boasted it as this thing that was going to, shake the very foundation of, British Parliament to its core, and it ended up being a guy just making up lies. And now he's here in this UFO arena talking about craft so large that they had to have buildings built around them because they couldn't be moved, or he knows for sure people who work within the UFO legacy reverse engineering programs. It's just like, guy, you don't know for sure because you're not read into the program. Like, just the fact that you know it would be illegal, and the person who told you would be thrown in prison probably.
Can I just add real quick? So I'm more interested. I'm not so much interested in Ross himself. I am more interested in who the people behind the scenes who are trolling him are, because he's obviously getting phone calls from people who allege to be in the military. I would hope that at the very least he makes sure that they do work for the military in some capacity, even if he can't verify the other stuff. Clearly there's some people behind the scenes who are just trolling him, and he just goes with it. I'm curious who is doing that.
I don't know if he's being trolled more over he's in on it. Like he sees the opportunity in front of him. I think the first book he wrote made him I know I bought the audiobook version of it and the hard copy. Like I think he knows exactly what he's doing. I think if that's my professional opinion, I think he knows exactly what he's doing when he says things like this. And there's also, he always leaves himself an out. If you really listen closely to him, there's usually an out where he could always come back and say, well, that's not what I meant. Look what I said here. I said alleged, right? You know, like I know I didn't say it was a fact. It was alleged. And I also said over here 10 minutes later that, you know, it could be a black project. So it's like he gives you little sprinkles of truths while he's lying straight to your face. And the people that he's the mouthpiece for have been caught lying, have been caught blackmailing people, have been caught using other people to send messages to other people, to intimidate, to, you know, to be fearful of all the exact same things that he just put out there. He's guilty of putting on other people. It's just a weird, it's very difficult for me to take any of this at face value, with the experiences that I've had anyway.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely an area where I recognize my own bias as a therapist, because I do generally take people at their word, and I do tend to believe that what people are telling me is what they believe.
Right.
And so I see a lot of people who just immediately jump to, this guy's a grifter, he knows he's lying, he's just doing it for the money. Whereas I typically kind of fall back on more other kinds of explanations, like, yeah, he's a true believer and he has really low standards of evidence and he's part of that community. And as you know, how easy it is to be sucked into that rabbit hole, and how hard it is to climb out of it, especially when you have a financial incentive not to.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Andreas, man, thank you for taking me to this last hour. That was a lot of fun.
That was an hour?
Yeah, that will be about that almost. Yeah, man, that was a lot of fun. I always love when you come on the show, even on short notice, because your perspective is so much better than mine. I don't know if it's better, but it's definitely more gentle. And yeah, I think it's like a little bit of sugar with the spoon of medicine, a little bit, like with you and me. So I enjoy the conversations a lot, because you always get me to slow down and go, oh, okay, fine, Angelie really believes what she's saying. Okay, yes, you're the clinical professional, and what you just said makes total sense. So, you know, maybe cut her a little bit of slack, and I totally understand what you're saying. But yeah, God damn it, it's frustrating to like, how do we combat these people without being looked at as assholes? And yeah, you're helping me with that, so I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And I hope that the link that you shared with the audience is helpful to someone, because I know it is hard to find help without being ridiculed or, the fear of being locked up in a mental institution. And I hope if anyone who needs it, they can find the help they need if they want.
Yeah, and again, guys, I'm going to put that link again right now in the live chat. So if you're having these issues, save this for when you're ready, or if you know somebody who does, please share the link with them. Again, it's something that's going to be included in all of the show notes going forward. So Andreas, man, thank you for coming on short notice, and thank you for adding all of this valuable information. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much.
And the crowd loves you, by the way. Just absolutely loves you.
I think the ASMR comment is the one that makes me happiest. I would never have imagined, because obviously when I hear my own voice recorded, I just, it's cringe.
I mean, you are a therapist. You can put people into hypno-regression, so you've got to have some kind of soothing voice on some level to do that, I would assume. You can't be Fran Drescher and be, like, okay, now relax. Like, you got to have a pretty decent voice. So, yeah, man, I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. And, yeah, again, open door policy for you. Anytime you want to come on the show, if you see something, DM me. And if I could bring you in, I'll always do it, because, yeah, your insight is really incredible and just super helpful in a time like this, where it's very difficult to combat very bad information or or areas where people fall into echo chambers that send them deeper down these holes that cause the issues that they have in their life. And so, yeah, man, I can't appreciate you enough, really.
Awesome. And I appreciate you. Thank you for all the work you do.
Thanks, man. All right. Well, I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Yep. Ciao. Guys, that was Andres. That was a great show. My lady just walked in the door, so you know what time it is. You know what time it is. Sorry, I blew out your ears there with the music. Want to thank my impromptu guest, Andres, for coming and hanging out for the last half hour. Want to thank everybody who was in the chat, by mods, Matthew Riot, and all of my other wonderful mods. Sorry, guys, I'm having a brain fart. Rodrigo Vieira, thank you so much for being here, being a mod. Sparky Pilot, everyone who was here. Bobby Broadway. I'm going through Wise Monkey, Chris Johansson, Blake McCreary. You guys, everybody, thank you so much. Bat Calabria, night, buddy. Thanks for being here. Mama's Dope Boy, thank you. Yeah, I saw your comments. Thanks for enjoying the show. Yeah, those are the shows, we'll be doing a lot more often. So yeah, hang around, check out the spaces. Oh, by the way, I know I've been teasing a story, and it's a big one. It is a pretty big story that I'm working on right now. I feel like a real journalist. It's actually kind of crazy, and how this fell into my lap is pretty crazy. But if these allegations are true, which it's looking like they are, yeah, it's gonna open a can of worms that is gonna be a lot more questions for people in this community. Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. But before I say anything, I want to make sure that it's right, because I'm not a news breaking kind of organization. That's not something that usually happens on this channel. So I think we've done it once, and that was so scary when we did it, because it was just like, oh, are we right? Do we have this right? And so far, out of the 3 places we've double checked, one of them has gotten back and said, yep, this is right. And now I'm waiting on the other 2 sources to triple confirm that these allegations are real. And I'm telling you, all I'm gonna say is I told you so. And everybody was asking, oh, why? They're so nice. They're such nice guys. Hopefully next week we'll get some more answers. If not Monday, then hopefully Friday. And depending on what comes in, I'll run with this story, hopefully by next week. And by the time we break this story, that's just going to lead to more questions that need to be answered down the road. As to what the repercussions for this will be. It's pretty wild. I mean, even though I knew, I didn't know it was to this extent. It was very shocking. So, yeah, stay tuned, because we'll definitely be talking about that here in the next week or so. Other than that, you guys have a killer weekend. If you haven't, like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. That way you're notified every time we go live. And yeah, have a great night, y'all. Love you. Peace.